Hearty shalom to you, Jeffrey Seif here. Glad to be taking a look at the book. We're in the book of Acts, the 9th chapter. We're making our way through, and we've come to a fellow named Saul, who is a real radical kind of guy. He was hell-bent on destroying Messianic Jewish believers, but he had a radical encounter, just changed his life. He was changed. People were skeptical about it. We're told in chapter 9, verse 21 of the skepticism, and people were saying, wait a minute. This guy who was hell-bent on destroying us is now advocating for us, and what's this all about? They were shocked. You know, sometimes we pray for people. There may be people in your webs of relationship that are just really in a bad way, and we just don't believe God can do anything with them. God's been transforming people. Bible says there where sin abound, grace abounds, and that certainly is attested in the life of this man who is just getting his legs underneath him. It's interesting, if you look in the 9th chapter of Acts, Saul has chutzpah, he has gumption, he's bold, and God's going to use that. We're told that he has his adversaries, but in verse 22, that Saul kept growing stronger and stronger. People didn't like him outside of the believing community, and within the believing community, there was skepticism. This is so much the case. Of course, we know that he comes to faith. He's en route to Damascus, and he's taken in there and makes his way around. He's eventually, we're told in 26, going to come to Jerusalem, and there again, people were sheepish. They just didn't want to warm up to him immediately. We're told in 26, when Saul arrived in Jerusalem, he made attempts to join up with the disciples, but they were all afraid of him. They all had their reasons, and it's understandable. Sometimes people can be standoffish toward us, and we don't like that. But it happens sometimes. It just is what it is. That's the tough news. Here's the good news. And I want to just build a little talk around verse 27. Difficulties notwithstanding, understandable as it is that people are standoffish toward Paul, we're told in verse 27, but Barnabas took him in and brought him to the emissaries, brought him to the apostles. Barnabas was introduced into the narrative earlier. He had a lot of built-up equity with the leadership in Jerusalem. He was an islander. He liquidated some assets, made a donation. He donated it. He didn't just give money. He gave his time, his energy. He was just a transformed guy. He was a go-to guy, and they all knew him and loved him. He had influence. He, in his heart of heart, warms up to Saul, and he uses his influence with the leadership to bring Saul forth. We're told there were people in verse 26, they just weren't believing that this guy Saul was for real, but Barnabas knew better. But, there's a conjunction there, but Barnabas took him in and brought him to the emissaries. He used his influence to advance the cause. Now, I want to just stop there for a second. What would the world be like if disciples used their influence to advance the cause? Well, I think personally our congregations would be a lot bigger. We have influence with people, and if we would just bring them forth, hey, come here. Within your webs of relationships, there can be people that are floundering, they're disoriented, they're troubled. And if you were to use influence and say, come here, come with me, and bring them in, and bring them forward, and put them forward, I think our congregations would double just like that, minimally, if individuals would use their influence. If individuals would use resource to commend this thing forward. People talk about passing it forward, being a blessing and passing it forward. If we would use our time, and if we'd use our dime, if we would just, bring it all forward. Let me just speak frankly that, there's 168 hours in a week. Someone says, well, look, I don't have any money to give to use my influence to bring the gospel forward. Okay, what about time? There are different ways that people commit just to put into it to move the ball forward. And the way this game is played, the Lord puts it on people's hearts to push it forward, to bring it forward. And that's what happened here. Here's the greatest. Well, he's going to become the greatest of these disciples. He wasn't even an original. The originals were suspicious of him. People were standoffish toward him, but he had destiny on him. And there was one man who recognized it and brought this thing forward. I think of Messianic Jewish experience on the whole, that a lot of well-intended people, they just don't understand it. But if people with influence would help bring this forward and commend it to denominations, to pastors, to different people, and say, look what God is doing. And a great way to do that, I think, is through the Tree of Life Bible. This rendition is put forth by Baker Books, one of the larger producers of religious materials in the English language. It gives it a kind of credibility that wouldn't otherwise be there, credibility to the text. I think when you look in the text, there are credible individuals that labored with me to tender the translation, and we have a good team, we have a good product, and what we want to do is bring it forth. Oh, be a Barnabas for us, please, and help get the word out and commend this perspective. What God is doing today, if you would commend it to the world at large, we surely would appreciate. You could be a Barnabas. Well, Jeffrey Seif here signing out. Blessings to you. Ciao.